Good afternoon. Hello to the Unleashed Nation out there. My name is Phil Griazzo. I am sitting in for Matt Connarton. He said I could do whatever I want, so we're going to do some local politics, and we'll throw in some national and some international stuff too while we're at it. But since it is a city election year, let's roll the clips of my opponent and myself.
Hello, my name is Bill Berry. I am a candidate for Alderman in Ward 10. I am married to my wife Debbie, and we have an 11-year-old daughter. I am running for Alderman because I believe that I can make a difference. As a lifelong resident of Manchester, I am disappointed in the direction that our city is heading. We need an Alderman that will fight for all of our residents. We can't afford an Alderman that continues to vote no on matters that are very important to moving Manchester forward. The crime rate in our city is on the rise. In my 28 years in law enforcement, I have seen the effects that burglaries and other crimes have on people. I intend to meet with our police chief and his staff to see what we can do as a community to keep our residents and property protected. As a police officer in Auburn, I have been involved with a very successful neighborhood watch group. It is important that we all are vigilant of our surroundings and we communicate with our neighbors. If we work together, Manchester will be a safer place to raise a family. Our school system is in decline. The classrooms are overcrowded. I can assure you that I will meet with our school officials, teachers, and parents, and together we will find a solution that will give our children the resources necessary to ensure that they receive a quality education. I am very proud of my community service in Manchester. I have volunteered my time with the Manchester Boys and Girls Club, Salvation Army, Challenger League, Special Olympics, Big Brother, Big Sister, as a mentor in our schools and several other organizations. I have also volunteered as a baseball, football, and basketball coach for over 30 years. In 2009, I received the Queen City Rotary Service to Youth Award for my volunteer efforts that involve children in our community. I am also the past president of the Webster House. In closing, it is very important that we elect an alderman that is committed to moving our city forward. We can't afford an alderman that will continue to vote no, but doesn't offer any solutions to the problems that we face daily. I would like to thank Manchester Public Television for giving me the opportunity to address the voters of Ward 10 in the city of Manchester. Please vote for Bill Berry as your next alderman. Together, we can make Manchester a city that we can all be proud of. Thank you, and stay safe.
Wondering why I would play my opponent's video on the show. Well, that's intentional because I'm planning to pick it apart. So if you paid attention to what Mr. Berry had to say, and by the way, please don't vote for Bill Berry, please vote for Phil Griazzo. I took Matt up on his offer to host his show, actually, so that I had an hour to tell you why you should not be voting for my opponent, actually more why you should be voting for me. Some of the things that my opponent had to say in his clip were that the city's moving in the wrong direction, and that I vote no. I vote no because the city's moving in the wrong direction. So do you want to at least one person on the board who's going to vote against the wrong direction the city's going to? I'd hope that you would vote for Phil Griazzo to keep me on the board, to keep voting against the wrong direction that my opponent seems to think the city's going in. And actually, that's the one thing I agree with him on, and that's why I vote no quite often. Coming here to the studio today, we're on Elm Street. They're replacing sidewalk to the tune of $380,000. I asked the folks in Manchester, are they replacing your sidewalks in your neighborhoods? They're not replacing the sidewalks in my neighborhoods, and I've been fighting for sidewalk repair throughout the city for 4 years now. And I'm going to continue to fight for that because I think that the infrastructure in the city that Mr. Berry talked about in his response to the Union Leader article, I'll get to that in a second, that speaks volumes of where the city's priorities are. They'll spend $380,000 on a sidewalk that doesn't need to be improved, but they haven't spent a dime out in front of your house to make sure that you can get down the street on your own sidewalk, whether you're disabled or handicapped or just having issues with mobility. So I look at the way that the city prioritizes its money, where it spends its money, and most often I have no choice but to vote no on a lot of the things that they're wasting your money on. It's your money. It's not my money. It's not the city's money. It's your money. And I have to vote no. I have no choice but to vote no to be sure that they're not wasting your money on things that are unnecessary. One of the perfect examples, aside from the sidewalk on Elm Street, is the interchange at I-293 at Exit 1 over by the mall. They replaced a whole section of highway, on-ramps, off-ramps, didn't need to be done, to the tune of $1.8 million. The city bonded $1.5 million to do road improvements within the city of Manchester. I would think that the state of New Hampshire would spend that $1.8 million within the city of Manchester on the state roads that it has, Route 3, Route 28, things like that. So I often look at waste in government, and I have no tolerance or time or patience for it. So actually, this is a call-in show. If anybody out there wants to call in and talk about any city topics, state topics, federal, international, I'm open to do that as well. The call-in number here is 413-0223. I just figured I'd take the opportunity and connect with the people in Manchester on a different level to find out what issues are most important to you, talk to you about why I vote the way I do, and if Mr. Barry thinks, I should just call him my opponent. If my opponent thinks that the city's going in the wrong direction, I couldn't agree with him more, and that's why I'm always voting no. So if he's wanting me to vote yes, that means that he's wanting me to vote with the rest of the board in taking the city in the wrong direction. Now, if you use that as an indicator, Mr. Barry's not a bad man, but he's not going to be a good vote, and you can tell that in his responses. Now, when we talk about the tax cap, his response to the union leader was, I believe the tax cap can be an effective tool in controlling spending. However, not at the expense of diminishing public safety, the quality of our school system, and the maintenance of our infrastructure. Right there, that tells you he's going to vote to override the tax cap and raise your taxes. I think that there's ways to do those things, and I do know that there are ways to do those things. There's plenty of solutions to come up with doing those things without raising your taxes, and it's called priorities. Schools' biggest example is the largest amount of money that we spend in the city is on the schools. Now, when Dr. Brennan was superintendent, he was in front of the board once on a very rare occasion because the school board does not let school issues come before the board except for their budget. Mr. Brennan tells the board that there's approximately 900 teachers and there's 15,000 students. That's roughly 16 students per teacher. Why do we have oversized classrooms? I understand that some classes have fewer students because they're special needs or they're in a different program, but I would think that the administration and the management of the school system would be able to find a way to make sure that with that ratio of teacher to student that there are no oversized classrooms, but that doesn't happen. And the reason that doesn't happen is the administration's priorities. However well-intentioned the school board may be, the administration, just as on the city side with city departments, the administration and the city departments, those are the ones who really run the city. They're the folks that'll stay in their position for 20 years, whereas an alderman or a mayor may stay for a few years and move on. And then it's up to the next group to come in to figure out where all the skeletons are buried, where all the money's hidden, what the real processes are, why things get done the way they do and why they don't. And by the time you figure that out, the next election rolls by and the department heads or the school administration or whoever may be in charge of the city at that time shrugs their shoulders and hopes that the next group can figure it out. And that's not an efficient way, or I think an appropriate way to be running the city. So when you hear that the spending cap is an effective tool to control spending, but not at the expense of diminishing public safety, school system, maintenance of our infrastructure, that's a clear indication that that's a person who's going to vote to override the spending cap, which is a vote to raise more of your taxes. Now, as my time on the board for the past 4 years, I've actually been saving you money. The education budget has risen. All the other things have risen. But your taxes have stayed relatively low. If you go to the city website and you look under finance, under the budget, you'll be able to look up the budget trends for 2011, 12, 13, and 14. Most departments are generally leveled or saved money. Education has gone up every year, so let's go back to education. Seems to be a really big topic that everybody likes to say it needs more money, but nobody comes up with any solutions. Just every year it needs more money. It needs more money. Well, every year it gets more money. It started in 2011. On the city website anyway. In 2011, it started with $148,742,185. 2012, it was up to $150 million. 2013, $152 million. 2014, $156 million. And that's just what you, the taxpayer in the city of Manchester, provide to the school district, not to mention what the money they get from the state or the federal government. So every year, the Manchester School District gets millions and millions of more dollars, and recently they've been getting less and less students, but somehow it costs more to educate them, and it doesn't really translate to anything for the student. So if you look at the current situation, we still don't have a contract with the teachers union. They refuse to negotiate paying their fair share of their health care costs. Most every other department in the city and most every other employee in the city is pretty close to pushing 20% of their own responsible payment on their end, co-pays, things like that. The school union, on the other hand, doesn't believe that it should be paying that much for their insurance, and in that respect, they refuse to come to an agreement with the city or the school board on their contract. School year's already started. Contracts are already going. What they're doing now is they're relying on a clause in the contract called the evergreen, that their last negotiated contract will stay in place forever until there's a new contract negotiated. And that sort of stuff happens on the city side too. As my term as a state representative a few years ago, last year actually, 2012 was my last year, we passed a law to eliminate the evergreen clause, that once your contract once your contract ends, if you haven't negotiated a new one, then you have to start over. You don't get to just automatically keep what your last contract had. So the things that are bankrupting our city are programs like that. One specifically is called the Yager-Decker. Now the Yager-Decker is a pay scheme that was devised many years ago on how to fairly pay all the city employees, and you know, you have to give credit to the city employees. They do a lot for the city, but however, they're also making a lot of money to do so. You look at the salary and benefits; they got automatic raises just for showing up to work and not getting in trouble. Now, any other business, and I'm a small businessman, any other business in the private sector that gave people raises based on that, you wouldn't have much of an economy left. And we've got a pretty rough economy right now, so that's definitely something that we need to be paying more attention to. We need to make sure that the money that you spend, or actually the money that the city takes from you and spends, is spent appropriately. I'm going to see if I can get the Facebook up here and get some people to call in. Anybody else out there, please feel free to call in. I've also got some other items that I have on the list here. So we started with my opponent's video, so I guess it's only fair to play my video at this point, so you can see the things that I'm talking about, and then we'll go and we'll pick through that one. So Brendan, if you can please go ahead and roll that one. Hello Manchester, and hello Ward 10. I'm Phil Griazzo, and I'm running for re-election as your alderman. On November 5th, you will be choosing between two distinctly different candidates and voting for someone to represent you at City Hall on several important issues. The biggest are the city budget, the school budget, employee contracts, and how much money city taxes will take from you and where it will be spent. My opponent and I are very different, and the choice is clear. When it comes to the budget, I have always voted for lower taxes and responsible spending. My opponent has already indicated he would support an override of the cap, increasing your taxes. When it comes to our schools, I'm dedicated to improving educational opportunities and choices for our children and their families wherever I can, such as sponsoring the legislation that allowed MST to become a 4-year program, or voting to buy new books and computers and technology for our students when the district could not. They chose other priorities, the latest of which are a public relations position and implementing Common Core. My opponent does not oppose Common Core and simply advocates giving the school district more money with no real plan. In the next year, the city will negotiate new contracts for all city employees, teachers, and unions. There will also need to be some tough decisions made on the city retirement system, which is $100 million in debt. If that isn't fixed soon, the whole system will collapse, and you, the taxpayer, will be on the hook to pay for it all. With massive debt of the retirement system and the Yager-Decker pay scheme providing automatic raises and increases for simply showing up to work, both are on track to bankrupt the city, by the way, you have to ask yourself, who will better represent you during negotiations? Myself, a small business owner from the private sector who constantly keeps his eye on the bottom line, or my opponent, a retired government employee whose benefits and insurance are already paid by your taxes and who's taking significant campaign contributions from the groups whose contracts are to be negotiated? I've always worked to ensure you get full value for every tax dollar spent and will always look for ways to save you money. I've worked with the members of the board to implement single-stream recycling, with the New Hampshire Rivers Council to clean up McQuestion Brook, and business owners to revive 2nd Street. We now have more than a dozen businesses that have either expanded, built new facilities, upgraded, moved into the ward, or will be soon. That means more jobs and greater options. I put great emphasis on public safety and have worked with the Manchester Police over the years to increase patrol routes in West Manchester. I advocated for more officers ahead of the summer's rise in burglaries and for the MPD to start fingerprinting at break-ins so we can identify these people and catch them. I'm asking for your vote so I can keep doing all the hard work it takes to improve our neighborhood and fight for you at City Hall. I am committed to providing excellent service and will continue to help resolve any problems you may have. I answer all phone calls, messages, and emails, meet with residents at their homes or the problem areas in the ward. I set up and attend meetings with you at the department responsible to handle any problem you have. It has been an honor to serve the people of Ward 10, and together we have accomplished a lot, but there is still plenty of work to be done. I ask for your vote on November 5th. If you have any questions or need any help, feel free to reach me on my cell phone, 669-0494. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to seeing you on Election Day. So we're back, and that is my cell phone, and I carry it with me. So folks that do call me in the neighborhood, they get response immediately. But as we're talking on this program here, if you want to call in, please call in to 413-0223. Now, in my speech there, I touched on a number of topics, and I spoke kind of fast because I only had 3 minutes, which is another reason I took Matt up on having this full hour to vet the issues of Ward 10 and Manchester. One of the issues I brought up was the police presence, the response to the burglaries that we've had over the summer, and those have pretty much gone away because the air conditioners have come out of the window, and it's a lot harder to break into your house currently for these folks that are doing this. One of the efforts that I sort of got involved with and undertook and pushed for were the fingerprinting kits that the police department picked up, and I'm glad that they did, because having your house broken into, it's not a good feeling. I've had my car broken into out in front of my house. Luckily, I haven't had my house broken into yet. But for the folks out there that have had their houses broken into, you know that having an officer come there just to record the history of what has happened isn't very satisfying. You want to catch the people that did it. And the only way you can really do that is to take the evidence and not just a report. So when they're taking fingerprints from these scenes now, they're actually able to identify, even if the person isn't in the system, which is one of the arguments that Manchester Police Department has usually been able to uphold, is why they haven't been fingerprinting for all these years. And I moved into Ward 10 16 years ago, and that was my first experience with the MPD, was when my car was broken into the first time. They weren't fingerprinting anything, and there were clear fingerprints laying around inside my vehicle on CDs that they could have easily identified, or at least been able to identify later, the person that had stolen my equipment out of my vehicle. But now that they're doing it at houses, we have the opportunity of not only catching somebody, but identifying somebody that has done it to multiple places. So let's take, for example, you've got one person who's broken into 10 houses, and they only catch him at the 10th house, and they charge him with the burglary for the 10th house. It's not as great of a charge as if you can also place him at the 9 other houses where you have his fingerprints and have had break-ins. So I'm very proud to have done that. And in contrasting my video, my 3-minute speech with my opponent's 3-minute speech, he referenced a watch group that he started in Auburn as a paid police officer of the Auburn Police Department. I haven't seen one in Ward 10. I don't know how long my opponent's been in Ward 10. I haven't really known about him until last year when we were out on the street corner, Queen City Avenue and 2nd Street, waving signs for the election last year. But like I said, he's not a bad man. He just won't be a good vote. And trying to scare you into voting for him, I don't think is a very appropriate approach. Like I said, he references this watch group that he started in Auburn, and in his speech and in his writings to the union leader, touts that we should have a watch group in Manchester, or at least in Ward 10. And you don't need to be alderman to start a watch group. I didn't need to be alderman to work on the dog park. You don't need to be an alderman to do the things that you want to do because you care about your neighborhood, or because they're a good idea. You're going to wait until you're alderman to sort of implement them. That's not leadership, I don't think, and not a responsible approach to trying to earn votes, in my opinion. Let's see. One of the ideas is implement here in the Union Leader article, when they questioned the candidates for the primary. He's been in law enforcement for 20 years, and by the way, he's a retired sheriff's officer. So you're paying for his retirement and his benefits to the tune of I don't know how much, but with the way government employees get paid these days, it's got to be somewhere near, with salary and benefits, at least $100,000 a year. So within the next 10 years, my opponent will be a millionaire, and where will you be? So he's involved in setting up successful neighborhood watch group in Auburn, and has these ideas of implementing watch groups and educating the residents of our city on how we can all work together to make our city a safer place. There's nothing stopping my opponent from doing that today. Hasn't been done, and using that as an election tool, I think is not a it's not a great approach. If you want to do something for your neighborhood, you do it. When I was I'm still just a guy in Ward 10, and I go out and I do cleanups. Like I said in my 3-minute speech, I helped clean up McQuestion Brook, which is actually one of the largest brook trout places in the state of New Hampshire, by the way. Don't forget about that. That's a good place to go fishing, but make sure you got a license, because they'll scoop you up if you don't, or at least they'll take your equipment. He also talked about not having any ideas. That's a funny one, because I've got all sorts of ideas, and unfortunately, since the city is going in the wrong direction, and those are his words, and I tend to agree with them, but they're going in the wrong direction, and it's being led by a group that's not like me, not like-minded. So I have ideas. They're just not being adopted. One of them is, let's take, for example, the trash collection. Okay, we've got 3 guys on a truck. You get the arm, like Connarton Waste has when they come around and pick up their recycling, single stream recycling, which was a solid waste committee. I happen to be on that committee that we push for to improve the recycling in the city, which actually saves you hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I'm always trying to save money so that you don't have to take the city doesn't have to take so much of yours. That's just one idea. The other idea happens to be along the same lines, and that's the trash collection. You've got 3 guys that currently go out on a truck. If Connarton can go throughout the city with a recycling truck that has 1 driver and 1 arm to pick up the same size barrel that our trash barrels are, don't you think the trash collection could be the same way? We would save 2/3 of our cost on trash collection, which could then be used for other items such as schools, if folks think that the schools need more money, and if they do, that's great, but let's find ways to save it so that we can provide it to the school rather than just taking more money of yours and giving it places where it may not necessarily be needed. And I say that because if you go to that city website in the finance and look under the budget book, you'll notice that last year and this year there's always a surplus at the end of the year, which is roughly about $2 million. That means the city took $2 million from you that it didn't need to take. And at the end of the year, rather than giving it back to you in the form of a tax reduction or putting it somewhere more important, the city will take that money. More important, I mean the rainy day fund, or to pay down the debt. You pay roughly, I think, about $18 million. No, I think it's $30 million. I'll have to go back to this budget sheet here. Debt service, that's under a different one. But in any event, you're paying roughly between $18 and $30 million on debt. The city keeps borrowing more money. It's sort of like the federal government right now, currently in their struggles, as we want to get into some international topics. The city keeps borrowing more money, keeps getting further in debt, and our bond rating just went down. Some people will cite that it was the spending cap, which was the reason that the bonding went down, but I completely disagree. It's the spending cap that will eventually bring our bond rating back up, because we won't be borrowing so much money. We'll be focusing where we spend our money. We'll be prioritizing and spending it on the things that are important to the city of Manchester, which is the focus and where we should be, instead of going in the wrong direction. So that's the one thing I agree with my opponent on. But anyway, back to this watch group. So my opponent wants to work with the police chief to form a burglary task force. I'm pretty sure the police department isn't going to allow an alderman to micromanage them. You can give them suggestions, and there's things that you could suggest, and many of us have, and I have, and one of them was the fingerprinting. That was a good one. But I've also suggested that Manchester, West Manchester specifically, being 1/3 the size of the city, and at the time coming on the board only had 3 patrols, that we should get more. We've got 1 more, so we've got 4 patrols, but it's still not the same as the rest of the patrols in the rest of the city. You can't give 1/3 of Manchester less than you give the other thirds of Manchester. It's not equal, it's not fair, and I'll continue to keep fighting for what's fair for our side of the river if I'm lucky enough to earn your vote on November 5th. One of the other reasons that I decided to take Matt up on this this time was my opponent had gone on the Bob Backus show, the Progress Report, and he was on with Jane Bolio, who together with Bob Backus were both discussing the issues with my opponent, and they were both very readily available to give him advice and input and work with him on his campaign, which should be an indication of where he'll wind up going with his votes. And the thing that I thought was most glaring was they were both so giddy that they would now be able to override the tax cap. And I thought that sort of odd, because they wouldn't be the ones overriding the tax cap. It would have to be my opponent. And if he's lucky enough to earn your vote on November 5th, which I hope that's not the case. I hope that I continue to serve the residents of Ward 10 as best I can, and every day that I do. I'm in the ward a lot, so I just a guy from the neighborhood who spends a lot of time there. I believe that you should do what you can to take care of your neighborhood. And you also heard in the clips there. I really wanted to go through the clips little by little, line by line, but the production staff tells me that that's not possible. So I'm jumping around a little bit within the speech there. So you look at the 3 minutes and you listen closely to the items that are discussed, and you can already get the indication that my opponent's going to override the tax cap. But then you also get the indication that crime is the issue that you should vote for him, and all these other items are, you know, sort of lost leaders. That there's no ideas. There's plenty of ideas. Another idea, we have the McIntyre ski area, and that generally generates a fair amount of money, even though I don't think the city should have a ski area or an arena, a baseball park. All these things are things that you're paying for so that other people can enjoy. But back to the ski area. The ski area makes a fair amount of money every year. We have a similar area, not for skiing, but for ATVers over in Rock Rimmon Park. If we partnered together with PSNH and Mount Calvary, there's also some land over in Goffstown that connects to it. It's about a 500-acre parcel. We could have an ATV park in City Manchester that would generate, I don't know, roughly $1 million a year or more. That's just an idea off the top of my head that would generate money. So there's plenty of ideas. There's plenty of savings. They're there. So when you hear my opponent say that there's no ideas, there's plenty of ideas. Unfortunately, the board that he wishes to join and vote along their line won't do any of those things. Their solution is to just take more of your money, because that's the easy way to do it. Take your money and spend it somewhere, instead of giving it back to you when there's too much of it at the end of the year. Well, Miss Bolio, my opponent's right-hand man at this point, no problem overriding the tax cap, and doesn't have a problem taxing you, doesn't have a problem actually as a state representative. I believe she proposed an income tax and a sales tax for the state of New Hampshire. Completely wrong. But watching her and my opponent on Bob Backus' show, The Progress Report, I thought it might be worthwhile of reaching out to Bob Backus and see if he wanted to do a debate on his show with me and my opponent. Haven't heard back from him. I'd offered to debate my opponent on the Gerard show before, both of my opponents on the Gerard show prior to the primary. Neither one of them wanted to discuss the issues in public for the voters. I think that speaks volumes. If somebody's not willing to stand up and defend their ideas and defend their beliefs and their votes, then I don't think they're being as honest with you as they possibly can. So those are just some of the things that I think that are important for the city election. We've got a myriad of them. There's law enforcement, there's fire, you've got employee contracts and negotiations. That's going to be a big one. You're going to have all sorts. Oh, these crazy iPads. You're going to have all sorts of topics that you're going to have to deal with and that you're going to have to pay for. Actually, one of them that I spoke about was the retirement system, so let's talk about that one. My opponent is a retired sheriff, as I said, and who knows how much he's getting. He's 53 years old. You're going to be paying his retirement almost longer, maybe even longer than he actually served. And that situation rolls over to the city side and the school side. You've got folks that are living longer, which is fantastic, but you have a pension system which the private sector doesn't even use anymore. It's 401ks and IRAs and Roths and all those things to be able to depend on yourself when it comes time for the retirement instead of depending on the taxpayer or the government to fund it for you. And you see what's happened in Detroit with their retirement system. They're not even making payments to their retirees anymore in some respects because there's no money. Why would you want to have a system that has no money? And right now our system really doesn't have any money. It's sort of going from one pocket to the other. The city's retirement system is $100 million in debt. It's a large number. Where are you, the taxpayer, going to come up with $100 million to keep paying for their retirements? Eventually that system's going to collapse, and the city's going to need to hit you up really hard one year for many years until they can pay that off. I think we need to figure out a way to deal with that system and deal with it now. If we don't, the city's going to go bankrupt right along with the Yager-Decker system that just gives pay raises for people for showing up to work. And there's plenty of people that do hard work for the city, and they work amazing jobs, and they do great things. They plow our snow, they remove our trash, they put out the fires in our houses, they catch thieves and murderers and rapists. Those are all great things that we need to have in the city. However, when it comes time for their retirement, I don't see how you're going to pay for all of that at once, for especially $100 million. That's a huge amount. If that falls apart, the city's going to fall apart. There's got to be a better way to fund retirement. There's got to be a better way to tweak the payment system. So the Yager-Decker, you just show up to work, and that's great. Like I said, you've got all these people that do great things. However, when it comes time for a raise, if you're working harder than the person next to you, do you think you should get the same raise? I know I wouldn't. And at some point, you see people decide that I don't need to work as hard anymore because the guy next to me just shows up and he gets the same raise, so I'm not going to work as hard. It doesn't create incentive. It doesn't breed new ideas of how to save the city money. It's not a very reliable system, in my opinion. It's arbitrary. It just automatically gives out money for no good reason. Cost of living allowances, step increases. There's a raise for a raise. You get raises just for getting raises, for being there for certain periods of time, which I understand. The folks that work for the city, they want to make a good living. They want to have a good retirement. But so do the people that are paying those bills. They want to make a good living and they want to make a good retirement. We've got a call coming in. Fantastic. Who we got, Brandon?
Somebody has to put it on hold.
Well, let me take it. Hello?
Hello.
How are you doing? Turn your TV down, please.
I'm doing fine.
Who we got, Brandon?
All right, there we go. What can I do for you? What question you got?
I was just wondering, you have a lot of great suggestions, but no solutions.
Turn your TV down, please.
A solution? I would think that a solution of saving money
What can I do for you? Question.
is a
You just made some suggestions, but you don't seem to have the answers to them.
how so?
Solution? I would think that
You got to turn your TV down, my friend.
This is the first time I called on the program.
Oh, that's okay. It's my first time being on the program. We'll work it out together. So yes,
I'll turn my TV down.
fantastic. Bear with us, folks.
this is the first time I call on the program. No, that's okay. It's my first time being on the program. We'll work it out together.
Hello?
Yes.
So yes, I'll turn my TV down. Fantastic.
Are you there? I can still hear your TV.
Oh, you can, just a minute. Hello?
Hello.
I'm back.
Fantastic. What can I do for you, sir?
I don't know what's going on, but I got a hard time making up my mind who I want to vote for.
Okay.
Because you have some great ideas, and you propose a lot of things, but do you have the answers?
Well, I think if the ideas are adopted, those are the answers to saving money for the city so that we could prioritize where it's spent in the future.
Would you be willing to give suggestions to the board as to what we should do about the problems we have in Manchester?
I talk to the board about the suggestions I have and the things that we could be doing in the city of Manchester all the time, sir. And they vote the other way, which is why my opponent says that we can't afford an alderman that votes no all the time. I think we need an alderman that votes no if the rest of the board is voting the opposite way. If they're voting in the wrong direction towards bringing the city into further debt, closer to bankruptcy, without coming up with priorities of where we spend the money on the important things first, those are the solutions. Unfortunately, the board doesn't want to implement them, and my opponent only wants to bolster them further. So if he thinks the city's going in the wrong direction, it sounds like he wants to help take it there quicker.
So you're going to vote no if the city is going in the wrong direction, right?
That's usually why I'm the only no vote on the board, sir, because I think that they're wasting your money and they're not prioritizing as best as they can. They're not putting money where it needs to go first. They just spend as much money as they can, and then when they have money left over, they find a way to spend that too, instead of giving it back to the people that they took it from.
Yeah, I like the way you talk.
Thank you.
You seem to really know what you're doing.
I try, and I try to pay attention, and
I thank you for your time.
Thank you for calling in.
And I will vote for you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay?
Thank you. You have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Well, I appreciate that. That's exactly what this job is all about, is listening to people that have an issue or a concern and discussing it and figuring out ways to come up with, I would hope, the right answer. It seems pretty simple. You got to find a way to save the city some money. You save some money, you can spend it in the other areas where you think it needs to go. If you don't save money and you don't spend it in the places it needs to go, like, say, the school district or police or fire or snow plowing or trash pickup, then those things start to deteriorate and you have issues. And then people become unhappy, and the only way to fix it is to get more of their money to make it better for them. I think the place that you need to start first is you need to save the City of Manchester and the taxpayers that pay for the City of Manchester some money. And to do that, you need to get rid of all the things that you don't need. So we've got plenty of those. They're called enterprise systems. The city owns a golf course. The city owns a concert venue. The city owns a baseball park. The city owns a few pools. The city owns a few ice arenas. The city owns an awful lot. And for the most part, all of those lose money, which means that you have to pay more for them. I don't even know how much they paid for that baseball stadium, but you're paying for that one. You're paying a lot for the Verizon, and thankfully to the mayor who negotiated a good contract with SMG to manage it, we're not having to feel that pinch because the management company has signed a long-term contract to be able to take on all that debt and all the payments and deal with all the maintenance and all those things. So congratulations to him and the board for getting behind that and approving that contract. Things like that. Those are the things we need to do. The same thing with McIntyre. By the way, you also own a ski area. So there's only one thing of all those that I named that you get to use for free, and that's the pool. Every year, the city spends about $300,000 to keep the pools open for about 2 months. They don't want to bother to charge anybody from out of town $1 to use the pool. They don't want to charge anybody within the city of Manchester to use the pool. And I believe that's wrong. I don't know what noise that was, Brandon. But you don't get to go skiing for free. You don't get to go to concerts for free. You don't get to go golfing for free. You get to pay for them all. You just don't get to use them, which I think is very ironic. But the pools you get to use, and not necessarily needed because we've got plenty of lakes and ponds and rivers, and a lot of folks have their own backyard pools. And so the argument comes down to, well, what about the kids that can't afford the pools because they're on lower fixed incomes? And my argument for that every time is, if you show me a good report card or you do some community service, we'll get you in the pool for free. No problem. But nobody wants to adopt those things because they think that they're going to lose votes if they don't have a pool in their neighborhood for their neighbors during summertime. And I don't necessarily concern myself with trying to get votes all year. I concern myself with trying to make sure that the city saves you some money. It spends its money in the right places. And whether people vote for me, I wish that they would, but I'm not going to sell myself out in order to get your vote. I hope to earn your vote. And I hope the things that I do in the way of voting on the board, calling attention to the things that the city does, it's been in the paper a few times. One of the issues was the way that they handled some business relations in Ward 10. Didn't give the business any notice, just came in one day and shut them down on a busy weekend. Cost that business owner a lot of money, cost his employees their jobs for no real good reason, in my opinion, and the board and the mayor saw that to be the case. The mayor worked with the department heads to come up with a new policy that says that you can't just shut down a business because you feel like it. You have to have some reasons, and you have to have your boss, your supervisor, your department head say that it's okay too, because those are the ones that really have to answer the questions come meeting time. Every board meeting we have at City Hall, first and third Tuesday, there's a public comment section, but there's also the agenda that we go through, which is usually pretty lengthy, and every department head has to sit in the audience in case we have questions for them. So to have the department head have to sign off on certain things, I think, is a very important idea that came to fruition, and it's something that will help the business community. It's just having the business in the neighborhood. We've got a lot of things going on 2nd Street right now. It helps because you've got jobs for people in the neighborhood. You've got property taxes being paid. You've got greater options, where to go out to eat, what to do, things like that. And I look at those potential options. So you can go to the Applebee's or the Alibaba Food Festival Circus across the street. Hess gas station built a new gas station. We'll be getting a Giorgio's high-end restaurant. The Elks came to Ward 10. The Burger King remodeled. Clam King remodeled. There's a new Super Melt. There's a Puerto Vallarta Mexican restaurant. There's where the Midas was. They tore that down. They're going to put in a Jiffy Lube kind of oil changing service. There's a lot of things going on 2nd Street. There's also a lot of traffic on 2nd Street, and I've been working with Southern New Hampshire Planning and New Hampshire DOT to address those. Had a meeting with the mayor in his office the other day in New Hampshire DOT about looking at a traffic light at Harvell, where exit 4 south comes off onto 2nd Street. One of the proposals from Southern New Hampshire Planning is a roundabout. Roundabouts not really very well received in most communities, but they're worthwhile in some places if they're done right, and that, I guess, could be the international hook, because there's a lot of places in many countries overseas that have roundabouts. So if there's anybody out there, and I know Mr. Connarton's show is somewhat international, and I don't know if you can see it now if it's live going over the internet to you, but feel free to call in. We'll talk about international issues as well. We touched a little bit on the national issue of debt, and we can see where that's coming. October 17th, I believe, will be the vote on raising the debt ceiling, and that's a bad idea. But back to 2nd Street. So you've got all these great choices, and I look at those, and then I apply that towards education. So everybody decries our education system in Manchester is crumbling, but they don't want to change the way that it's delivered. They don't want to change the function, except to go to Common Core, which I think we've all seen that. And you have no child left behind, you're going to change to Common Core. What happened to just teaching kids the basics, reading, writing, arithmetic, and then letting them learn what they want, what their passion is? You stick a kid in the classroom all day long and try to teach them something he doesn't want to learn, of course they're going to disconnect. Of course they're going to turn off. So the argument becomes, where do you educate your child? You educate your child down the street, because that's where the school in the city is, and that's where you have to send your child, unless you can afford to send them to private school, like my opponent, from what I'm told. So I don't know if your children are in private school, but my opponent's children are in private school, and will be collecting retirement paychecks and benefits from you. So he has these things that you do not, that you may not, or that you will not. But back to the school system. So there's all these things with the school system, but nobody wants to do anything differently other than to just change the name of the program that they're going to teach the kids under. When I was a state representative, I pushed legislation to make the Manchester School of Technology a 4-year program instead of a 2-year program, because we have plenty of kids in the system that want to learn something that they want to learn. Not that they're forced to learn, but something that gives them the drive to wake up in the morning, to hurry up to get to school, to want to learn something. And that's something I feel that a lot of people in my generation missed when we were going through grade school and when we were going through high school. You get the curriculum, and you work your way through it as best you can. There wasn't anything really that gave you motivation, unless you had a really good teacher, and I can only name 1 or 2 teachers that I had that were really good, and I remember everything that they taught me because they were really good teachers. But then you have the other teachers that get the same pay raise and get the same benefits, and all they have to do is show up to work, so why are they going to put in the effort? We've got that everywhere in society, and to have it in a school isn't the greatest thing. But my comparison to 2nd Street and the school district comes down to this. You can choose where you want to eat, you can choose where you get your gas, you can choose where you buy your groceries. You can't choose where you send your kid to school. I think that's crazy. We should be able to, at least within the public school system, have these opportunities, and I know the school board and the school district are now looking at redistricting. So it's sort of along those lines. You should, if your kid goes to Parker Varney and you think that they would do better in Bakersfield or Hallsville school, they have a better program, or that's the program your child wants to choose. Why can't you send them to that school? I don't think that pigeonholing parents and their kids into the school that's closest to them benefits anyone. certainly doesn't benefit the students. It doesn't, I'm all for helping the students find educational opportunities. That's why, I did what I wanted to do in ways of getting Manchester School of Technology to become open to all of our high school students. I think we should do something along the lines of that for grade school students. And I hear a lot of talk that they want to turn Manchester West or close it down and send all those students somewhere else, or create a magnet school. And that's sort of along the lines of school choice. If it's a magnet school, children can choose to go to that school. They don't just go to that school because it happens to be in their neighborhood. And I think those are the things that we need to consider when we're talking about education. We also need to consider about how much money we're spending, where it's being spent, what it's being spent on. Perfect example, last year, the year before, well, actually last year, we voted for last year's budget. We voted for books, technology, computers, and all. Well, the point is, we paid for things for the school district that the school district said it didn't have any money for, and I voted for that because we got to do whatever we can to help the kids in the school system. Why didn't the school district have the money to pay for those things? Because, if you heard in my 3 minutes, their priorities is to hire a public relations position. Why does the school district need a public relations position? Are they doing that bad that they have to get you to buy into the propaganda that they want to give you about the school system? We all know what's going on in the school system. We see that it gets more and more money every year. It doesn't turn in better and better grades every year. So by that logic, is it working? It's not, in my opinion. I don't think that just giving them more money for the sake of giving them more money is going to fix a thing. I think we need to come up with some standards and try to meet them, just basic ones. But we're not even doing that. We're just giving it more money and hoping for the best. A couple years ago, we spent $3 million. The board on the city side voted to give a loan to the school side for $3 million because the school didn't even have enough books for the kids. Where's the priorities? I thought this was all about the kids. If this is all about the kids, why aren't the kids getting the things that they need first, and then we can worry about the other things as we go along? And like I said, the teacher-student ratio, there's no way you should have an oversized classroom with that ratio. I just don't buy it. I can do simple math. I think most people can. Well, I'm trying to fill this hour, and I've got about 10 minutes left. So what I think is something that we should talk about is just city stuff in general. We've got a lot of things going on in the city of Manchester. There's a lot of there's a lot of construction. There's a lot of traffic. There's a lot of taxes. There's a lot of waste. There's a lot of things, and I think you take all the items into perspective, and you really need to pay attention about what's going on in the city. And I don't think there's a lot of people that necessarily do. There's a very low voter turnout most years. There is even fewer registrations. I think there's maybe 5,600 voters in Ward 10. There's way more than 5,600 people in Ward 10. You've got some people that only vote in city elections but don't vote in state elections. You've got some people that vote in state elections but don't vote in city elections. The city is the first place that takes your money. So if you're only voting in federal and state elections, you're only voting 2/3. You need to vote all of it because there's another pocket that the government's taking money from. The county is another one, but luckily they've been coming in with a flat budget the past couple of years, so your taxes haven't gone up because of county services. They've gone up because of city services, and in the past few years, they've been the lowest tax increases in the city in a long time. And of the past 4 budgets, I voted for 1 because it was a tax cut. The other 3 I have voted against because they've raised your taxes, and the money that was left over is surplus, which was money that they took too much of you from the previous year. They spent in other ways. One year they actually took some of that surplus and tried to buy my vote. I think they put up $25,000 or $75,000 out of $2 million to try to get me to vote for that budget, and it was close. I looked at the numbers and I almost went with it. I think that year was a 1% tax increase, but I still couldn't swallow it because that's your money. That was $2 million of the city taxpayers' money that should have gone back to them. It didn't. Why overtax you? Why overtax the people of Manchester? Doesn't make any sense to me. It drives people out of town. It makes the rest of us have to pay more in taxes. It makes it harder for us to provide more money for the schools or for the police or the fire department to pay for the infrastructure. You know, the infrastructure is the roads and the bridges and the sidewalks. What's really happening with the roads and the bridges and the sidewalks in the city of Manchester? Not a lot. They're spending $380,000 downtown Elm Street, but they're not spending $380,000 in your neighborhood. The state spent $1.8 million to redo Exit 1 at 293. They didn't spend $1.8 million to redo Route 3 or Route 28 or any of these 114, any of these other roads that go through Manchester, but the city borrowed $1.5 million for you on your behalf that you're going to have to pay back to fix those roads instead. It seems pretty simple to me, folks. There's priorities, and we all have them in our households. We all have to meet our budget. The city doesn't necessarily meet its budget. It just takes more money from you and spends it wherever it thinks it's possible or wherever it thinks they would like to spend it to get themselves more votes or to earn more popularity, to fix things that they think need fixing that don't necessarily need fixing. I don't know why you would spend $380,000 on a sidewalk that was, I don't even know how much they spent on it when they initially installed it with brick. And what was it before it was brick? And come on. We all see what's going on. They just keep borrowing money and spending money on things just for the sake of doing so. You could save yourself a lot of money. You could save yourself a lot of trouble. You could save yourself a lot of time. Start voting for the right people that are going to save you money. Listen to the candidate speeches that this station plays. Listen to the people that come knocking on your door and read the mail that they send you. Some of it you have to read between the lines, and other items you'll see that are blatantly obvious that tell you exactly what's going on. So let's pick apart these candidate ads one more time while I've got a couple minutes left. So Brennan, if you can roll both of those back to back, start with my opponent. Oh, we don't have them? They're gone? Oh, that's a shame. I thought we had technology. Technology is not all it's cracked up to be. Oh, I can wrap up? Okay. Well, I got a couple minutes left. I'm pretty sure I've lost most of the international folks. Most of the national folks. You see what's going on with Congress now. They're shut down, and now they're just getting spiteful. They're closing things that are just going to make the most Americans angry. Both sides. I'm not picking sides on anything. I rarely do. Party politics is what's destroying this country. You've got to, you know, I might be a registered Republican, but that's because I believe in being responsible for myself and not being dependent on somebody. And there's other reasons for that as well. But what's going on in Congress, both sides are sticking it to you. And both sides are just spiting each other, and we're all caught in the middle. You're closing down parks that didn't have a man stationed in the first place. Now you have to have a man there to keep it closed down? Come on, we all know how ridiculous that is. And it's all, what's that? You got it? Yeah, sure, go ahead, roll them.
Hello, my name is Bill Berry. I am a candidate for Alderman in Ward 10. I am married to my wife Debbie, and we have an 11-year-old daughter. I am running for Alderman because I believe that I can make a difference. As a lifelong resident of Manchester, I am disappointed in the direction that our city is heading. We need an Alderman that will fight for all of our residents. We can't afford an Alderman that continues to vote no on matters that are very important to moving Manchester forward. The crime rate in our city is on the rise. In my
that happens every summer.
Law enforcement, I have seen the effects that burglaries and other crimes have on people. I intend to meet with our police chief and his staff to see what we can do as a community to keep our residents and property protected.
I meet with them all the time.
As a police officer in Auburn, I have been involved with a very successful neighborhood watch group.
But not here in your own neighborhood.
It's important that we all are vigilant of our surroundings and we communicate with our neighbors. If we work together, Manchester will be a safer place to raise a family. Our school system is in decline.
Sure is.
The classrooms are overcrowded.
Shouldn't be.
I can assure you that I will meet with our school officials, teachers, and parents, and together we will find a solution that will give our children the resources necessary to ensure that they receive a quality education.
The resources are there. You got to prioritize.
I am very proud of my community service in Manchester. I have volunteered my time with the Manchester Boys and Girls Club, Salvation Army, Challenger League, Special Olympics, Big Brother, Big Sister, as a mentor in our schools and several other organizations.
So will he have time for you?
I have also volunteered as a baseball, football, and basketball coach for over 30 years.
Guess not. Doesn't sound like he's got a lot of time.
In 2009, I received the Queen City Rotary Service to Youth Award for my volunteer efforts that involve children in our community. I am also the past president of the Webster House. In closing, it is very important that we elect an alderman that is committed to moving our city forward.
Which I am.
We can't afford an alderman that will continue to vote no, but doesn't offer any solutions to the problems that we face daily.
I've offered plenty of solutions
I'd like
here,
to
and I
thank
only
the
vote no when they're going in the wrong
for giving
direction.
me the opportunity to address the voters of Ward 10 in the city of Manchester. Please vote for Bill Berry as your next alderman. Together, we can make Manchester a city that we can all be proud of.
I'm pretty proud of Manchester. And I think we all work together, and we've got a lot of hard things to deal with, and we'll continue to persevere. Go ahead and roll mine.
I gotta get it 1 second.
Oh, okay, that's fine. Yeah, we'll get that one up here too. So I mean, you can see that some of the things you'll hear from candidates at campaign time are the real deal, and sometimes you have to read between the lines. So if the city's going in the wrong direction and I'm voting no, isn't that what you want? Go ahead and roll
Hello,
mine.
Manchester, and hello, Ward 10. I'm Phil Griazzo, and I'm running for re-election as your alderman. On November 5th, you will be choosing between 2 distinctly different candidates and voting for someone to represent you at City Hall on several important issues. The biggest are the city budget, the school budget, employee contracts, and how much money city taxes will take from you and where it will be spent. My opponent and I are very different, and the choice is clear. When it comes to the budget, I have always voted for lower taxes and responsible spending. My opponent has already indicated he would support an override of the cap, increasing your taxes. When it comes to our schools, I'm dedicated to improving educational opportunities and choices for our children and their families wherever I can, such as sponsoring the legislation that allowed MST to become a 4-year program, or voting to buy new books and computers and technology for our students when the district could not. They chose other priorities, the latest of which are a public relations position and implementing Common Core. My opponent does not oppose Common Core and simply advocates giving the school district more money with no real plan. In the next year, the city will negotiate new contracts for all city employees, teachers, and unions. There will also need to be some tough decisions made on the city retirement system, which is $100 million in debt. If that isn't fixed soon, the whole system will collapse, and you, the taxpayer, will be on the hook to pay for it all. With massive debt of the retirement system and the Yager-Decker pay scheme providing automatic raises and increases for simply showing up to work, both are on track to bankrupt the city, by the way, you have to ask yourself who will better represent you during negotiations. Myself, a small business owner from the private sector who constantly keeps his eye on the bottom line, or my opponent, a retired government employee whose benefits and insurance are already paid by your taxes and who's taking significant campaign contributions from the groups whose contracts are to be negotiated. I have always worked to ensure you get full value for every tax dollar spent and will always look for ways to save you money. I've worked with the members of the board to implement single-stream recycling, with the New Hampshire Rivers Council to clean up McQuestion Brook, and business owners to revive 2nd Street. We now have more than a dozen businesses that have either expanded, built new facilities, upgraded, moved into the ward, or will be soon. That means more jobs and greater options. I put great emphasis on public safety and have worked with the Manchester Police over the years to increase patrol routes in West Manchester. I advocated for more officers ahead of the summer's rise in burglaries and for the MPD to start fingerprinting at break-ins so we can identify these people and catch them. I'm asking for your vote so I can keep doing all the hard work it takes to improve our neighborhood and fight for you at City Hall. I am committed to providing excellent service and will continue to help resolve any problems you may have. I answer all phone calls, messages, and emails, meet with residents at their homes or the problem areas in the ward. I set up and attend meetings with you at the department responsible to handle any problem you have. It has been an honor to serve the people of Ward 10, and together we have accomplished a lot, but there is still plenty of work to be done. I ask for your vote on November 5th. If you have any questions or need any help, feel free to reach me on my cell phone, 669-0494. Thank you for listening.